Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Miles Merrick stared at the cream-colored envelope on his workbench. Oil-stained fingers left dark smudges on the expensive paper as he turned it over. The Ashcroft family crest, embossed in gold on the corner, seemed to mock him. You gonna open that or just glare at it all day? Jerry, his shift supervisor, called from across the bay. Miles grunted and tore open the envelope. Inside was an invitation on heavy cardstock. The Ashcroft family requests the pleasure of your company for a weekend cruise aboard the Poseidon's Grace. Departure, Friday, 8 a.m. sharp. Portland Harbor, dock 17. Below, in Amber's flowing script, please come. It's important to me. To us. Miles folded the invitation and tucked it into his pocket. He'd known something like this was coming. Amber had been dropping hints for weeks about her mother wanting to mend fences and start fresh. In their 12 years together, he learned that when Harper Ashcroft extended an olive branch, there were usually thorns hidden among the leaves. The modest two-bedroom house Miles shared with Amber and their son sat at the edge of town, far from the Ashcroft family mansion overlooking the bay. It had been his parents' home before the accident that took them both, leaving him nothing but memories and a trust fund for his future children. He found Amber in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with precise movements. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, her posture perfect even in casual clothes. "I got the invitation," Miles said, placing on the counter. Amber looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "Mother's been planning this for weeks. She's even having the chef prepare that seafood pie you like." "Harper doesn't do family bonding without a reason," Miles replied, crossing his arms. "Last time we were on that boat, she spent the entire weekend explaining why I should let her invest Rhett's trust fund. That was a year ago. Things are different now." Amber moved around the counter, placing her hands on his chest. "She knows how important you are to me. This is her way of making peace." Miles looked into her eyes, deep blue, like the ocean before a storm. Once, he'd found comfort in those depths. Now he saw something cold and calculating swimming beneath the surface. "Where's Rhett?" he asked, stepping back from her touch. "In his room, building that model ship you got him." Amber's smile faltered slightly. "He's been asking when we can go sailing again. This would be perfect for him." The mention of their son hit its mark. Miles ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I'll think about it." "Miles." Amber's voice hardened slightly. "Don't make this about you and Mother. Rhett deserves to know his family. I know what our son deserves." The words came out sharper than he intended. He turned away, heading down the hall to Rhett's room. The door was ajar, and Miles paused to watch his son. Rhett sat cross-legged on the floor, attaching tiny sails to a model clipper ship. At 5, he already showed a focus and patience that reminded Miles of himself. "How's it coming along, sailor?" Miles asked, knocking gently. Rhett looked up, his face brightening. "Dad, I got the mast to stay up. Come see." Miles entered and lowered himself to the floor. Rhett immediately climbed into his lap, proudly displaying the half-finished model. "That's fine work," Miles said, examining the construction. "You've got a steady hand. Mom says we're going on Grandma's big boat." Rhett twisted to look up at him. "Are we?" Miles felt his resistance crumbling. "Thinking about it, buddy. Please? I want to see the dolphins again." Miles ruffled his son's dark hair, so like his own. "You drive a hard bargain." Later, after Rhett was in bed, Miles found Amber in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "I'll go," he said simply. "For Rhett." Amber set down her phone, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Mother will be pleased." "I don't care if she's pleased," Miles replied. "I care about my son. Our son," Amber corrected, her smile never faltering. "And we're going to be a proper family again. You'll see." Friday morning dawned clear and bright. Miles loaded their luggage into his pickup truck while Amber fussed over Rhett's appearance, combing his hair and straightening his collar. "Mom, stop," Rhett protested, squirming away. "Dad said I look fine." "Your father's idea of fine and your grandmother's are quite different," Amber replied, but relented with a sigh. As they approached Dock 17, the Poseidon's Grace came into view sleek, white, imposing against the blue horizon. At 120 feet, the luxury yacht was Harper Ashcroft's pride, a floating declaration of the family's wealth and status. Waiting at the gangplank was Harper herself, elegant in white linen pants and a navy blazer. Beside her stood Captain Ezra Lyle, tall and weathered, his captain's uniform crisp and formal. "There they are," Harper called, waving with practiced enthusiasm. Right on time, Miles parked and helped Red out while Amber rushed ahead to embrace her mother. Captain Lyle approached, offering to handle their luggage. "Good to see you again, Mr. Merrick," he said, his handshake firm. Miles nodded. "Captain," there was something in Lyle's eyes, a wariness, perhaps, or a silent apology that made Miles uneasy. Harper descended upon them, enveloping Rhett in a cloud of expensive perfume. "My handsome grandson, look how you've grown." "Hi, Grandma," Rhett said, enduring her embrace before breaking free. "Can I see the engine room again?" Harper laughed. "Always the little engineer. Captain Lyle will give you a tour once we're underway." She turned to Miles, her smile cooling several degrees. "Miles, you're looking healthy." "Harper," he replied simply. As they boarded, Miles noticed a young woman waiting on deck, the stewardess, he assumed. She was petite with dark hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail. "This is Tilda," Harper introduced with a dismissive wave. "She'll be taking care of your needs during our trip." "Yes, ma'am," Tilda replied, her voice soft but clear. "If you'll follow me." As they followed her below deck, Miles caught Tilda watching him with curious eyes. When their gazes met, she quickly looked away, but not before Miles saw something in her expression: concern, perhaps, or pity. Lunch was served on the upper deck, the table set with fine china and crystal. Chef Henri presented a seafood spread that would have impressed even the most discerning palate. Rhett, seated between Miles and Amber, eyed the unfamiliar dishes with suspicion. "Try the scallops," Harper encouraged. "They're flown and fresh from Maine." "They look like eyes," Rhett whispered to Miles, who bit back a smile. "Here," Miles said, cutting a small piece. "Just one bite. If you don't like it, you can have a sandwich instead." Rhett reluctantly tried the scallop, his expression shifting from doubt to surprise. "It's not bad." "Of course it's not," Harper said. "Ashcrofts have refined tastes." "He's 5, Miles pointed out. "Most kids his age think ketchup is a food group." Harper's smile tightened. "Red isn't most kids. He has Ashcroft blood." "And Merrick," Miles added, meeting her gaze steadily. "Yes, well," Harper said, lifting her wine glass. "We all have our crosses to bear." Amber laughed, as if her mother had made a charming joke. "Mother, behave. Miles was kind enough to join us this weekend." Captain Lyle, seated at Harper's right, cleared his throat. "Weather report says we'll have clear skies all weekend. Thought we might anchor in Blackfish Cove tonight. The stars are spectacular there." "Wonderful idea, Captain," Harper agreed. Amber mentioned Rhett has been learning about constellations. Miles glanced at his wife, surprised. He was the one who'd been teaching Rhett about the stars, pointing them out during their camping trips Amber always declined to join. "Dad shows me the stars all the time," Rhett said proudly. "He knows all their names." "Some men find time for hobbies," Harper said with a dismissive wave. "Others build empires." She turned to Miles with a too-sweet smile. "How is the dockyard, Miles?" "Still fixing things." "The dockyard is fine," Miles replied evenly. "Still fixing things that rich people break." As Tilda appeared to clear the plates, Miles noticed how Harper barely acknowledged her presence. Rhett, however, thanked her politely when she brought him ice cream. "You're welcome, young sir," Tilda replied with a genuine smile. "Would you like sprinkles?" "Yes, please." Rhett's eyes lit up. Harper made a small noise of disapproval. "Really, Tilda, he doesn't need more sugar." "It's fine," Miles said firmly. "Rhett can have sprinkles." As Tilda returned with the decorated ice cream, Miles noticed Captain Lyle watching Amber with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for an employee. Amber, for her part, was adjusting her hair, exposing the elegant line of her neck in what Miles recognized as a practiced gesture. After lunch, Miles took Rhett to the engine room, following Tilda below deck. The engine room was a marvel of modern marine engineering. and Rhett's eyes widened with delight as Tilda explained the various systems. "You know a lot about boats," Miles commented when Rhett was occupied examining a control panel. Tilda shrugged. "My father was a mechanic. Taught me everything before he passed." "How long have you worked for the Ashcrofts?" "Almost a year," Tilda replied, her eyes darting to Rhett and back. She lowered her voice. "Mr. Merrick, I don't mean to overstep, but—" The door to the engine room swung open, and Harper stood there, her smile not reaching her eyes. "There you all are. Tilda, I need you upstairs. Now." Tilda straightened immediately. "Yes, ma'am." As she slipped past Harper, Miles caught a flash of warning in her eyes. Harper waited until she was gone before speaking again. "Miles, I was hoping we might have a private conversation. About Rhett's future." Miles felt his jaw tighten. "His future is just fine." "Rhett, darling," Harper said, ignoring Miles' response. "Your mother is looking for you." Something about dolphins spotted off the port side. "Really?" Rhett looked up eagerly. "Dad, can I go see?" "Go ahead, buddy. I'll be up in a minute." As Rhett raced past Harper, she closed the door behind him, leaving Miles alone with his mother-in-law in the humming confines of the engine room. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries," Harper said, her facade dropping away. "You know why I arranged this trip?" "Enlighten me," Miles replied, leaning against a support beam that Harper's eyes narrowed. "Amber has been unhappy for years. You must realize that. If my wife is unhappy, she should talk to me about it." "She's afraid to," Harper said, moving closer. "You military types can be so volatile." Miles let out a short laugh. "Is that what she told you? That she's afraid of me?" "Not in so many words." Harper adjusted her expensive watch, a nervous tell. "But Mother knows. And I know you've been blocking her access to Rhett's trust fund, money that should be managed by professionals, by family." And there was the real reason for this charade of reconciliation. "That trust is for Rhett's education," Miles said firmly, "not for Ashcroft Shipping's cash flow problems." Harper's face hardened. "Don't pretend to understand business, Miles. It doesn't suit you. I understand enough. Your company is over-leveraged. The Shanghai terminal is bleeding money. You need capital, and you think Rhett's trust is an easy target. How dare you?" Harper hissed, her composure cracking. "Everything I've done has been for this family, for Amber and Rhett's security. Not for mine, though." Miles observed calmly that Harper's laugh was cold. "You were never meant to be permanent. A youthful rebellion, nothing more. Amber knows where she belongs." "With Captain Lyle?" Miles asked, watching the surprise flicker across Harper's face. "Or is he just the latest in a series?" "You know nothing," Harper spat. "Amber deserves better than a man who fixes boats for a living. And Rhett deserves better than a grandmother who sees him as a walking bank account." Harper stepped closer, her perfume cloying in the enclosed space. "Be careful, Miles. The Ashcroft family has weathered worse storms than you." "Is that a threat, Harper?" "A reality check," she replied, turning to leave. "Enjoy the cruise. It may be your last." Dinner that evening was a masterclass in force civility. Harper held court at the head of the table, while Captain Lyle hovered attentively nearby, finding excuses to remain within Amber's orbit. Rhett, exhausted from a day of exploration, was nodding off over his dessert. Miles gathered him up, ignoring Amber's protest that he should stay and enjoy the evening. "He needs sleep," Miles said firmly. "I'll put him to bed." In their suite, Miles helped Rhett change into pajamas and tucked him into the small bed in the adjoining room. "Did you have fun today, buddy?" he asked, smoothing back his son's dark hair. Rhett nodded sleepily. "I saw 2 dolphins and a seal. And, Tilda, show me how to tie a special knot." "Are you and Mom fighting again?" Rhett asked suddenly, his voice small. Miles felt his heart constrict. "What makes you ask that? You look at her like you're mad. And Grandma looks at you like she looks at the man who delivers packages wrong." Miles sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Your mom and I, we're working through some grown-up stuff. But we both love you very much. That will never change. Promise. Promise." Miles leaned down to kiss his son's forehead. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we'll explore the cove." Back on deck, the night had turned cool, the stars emerging in a clear sky. Miles stood at the railing, watching the dark water slip past the hull. The yacht had anchored in Blackfish Cove as planned, the lights of distant shorelines twinkling on the horizon. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Instead of Amber, it was Tilda, carrying a stack of folded blankets. "Sorry, sir," she said, setting the blankets on a nearby bench. "Mrs. Ashcroft thought guests might get cold out here." "Thoughtful," Miles replied dryly. Tilda hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before stepping closer. "Mr. Merrick, I need to tell you something. About my wife and the captain." Miles guessed that Tilda's eyes widened slightly. "You know, I suspected. Now I know," Miles sighed, turning back to the water. "How long?" "I'm not sure exactly. A few months at least." Tilda's voice was barely above a whisper. "But that's not what I—" "Tilda, there you are." They both turned to see Harper striding toward them, her smile brittle in the dim light. "The glasses in the salon need refreshing." "Right away, Mrs. Ashcroft," Tilda said, casting one last meaningful glance at Miles before hurrying away. "That girl is getting above herself," Harper sniffed. "I should never have let Amber convince me to hire her." Before Miles could respond, Amber appeared, a glass of champagne in her hand, her cheeks flushed. "There you are. Mother, the captain was asking for you. Something about tomorrow's route." Harper's demeanor shifted instantly, her smile returning. "Of course. Excuse me." When she was gone, Amber moved to stand beside Miles at the railing, close but not touching. "Beautiful night. Red asleep, out like a light," Miles confirmed. "Your mother and I had an interesting chat." Amber sipped her champagne, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh, she made it clear I'm not welcome in the Ashcroft family. Not now, not ever. Mother has strong opinions," Amber murmured. "You know how she is." "And what about you, Amber? What are your strong opinions about our marriage?" "About Captain Lyle?" Amber's grip tightened on her glass. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you having an affair with him?" For a moment, Amber said nothing, her profile sharp against the night sky. Then she laughed, a sound without humor. "You've always been so suspicious, so ready to think the worst of me." "That's not an answer." Amber drained her glass and set it on the railing with deliberate care. "I'm going to bed. Don't stay up too late. Mother has a full day planned tomorrow." She walked away, her back straight, leaving Miles alone with his thoughts and the endless, shifting sea. The second day of the cruise dawned bright and clear. Miles woke early, finding Rhett already up and watching cartoons on the suite's television. Amber's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold. "Morning, buddy," Miles said, ruffling his son's hair. "Where's your mom?" Rhett shrugged, eyes still on the screen. "She said she had to help Grandma with something important." Miles showered and dressed quickly, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. Harper's words from the previous night echoed in his mind. "It may be your last." He took Rhett up to the dining area, where breakfast was laid out buffet style. Tilda was there, arranging fresh fruit on a platter. "Good morning, Mr. Merrick." "Young Mr. Merrick," she greeted formally. "May I get you anything specific?" "We'll help ourselves, thanks," Miles replied, helping Rhett fill a plate with pancakes. As Rhett settled at the table, Miles moved closer to Tilda. "What were you trying to tell me last night?" Tilda glanced around nervously. "Not here," she whispered. "Meet me by the supply closet on the lower deck in 20 minutes. Alone." Before Miles could ask more, Harper swept in, resplendent in a white sundress and wide-brimmed hat. "Ah, the early birds. Sleep well, Miles." "Like a rock," he lied. "See my wife? Amber's on the bow, doing her morning yoga," Harper replied smoothly. "She didn't want to wake you." After 20 minutes, Miles left Rhett with Harper and headed to the lower deck. The supply closet Tilda had mentioned was tucked away near the crew quarters. He waited, checking his watch every 30 seconds, anxiety building. After 5 minutes, the door to the laundry room across the hall opened, and Tilda emerged, glancing nervously in both directions before approaching. "I can only talk for a minute," she said in a hushed voice. "Mr. Merrick, you need to get your son and yourself off this boat as soon as possible." "What?" Miles demanded, though part of him already knew. "I overheard them talking Mrs. Ashcroft and your wife." And later, the captain joined them. Tilda twisted her hands together. "They're planning something. Something about eliminating complications." Eliminating complications. Miles repeated, his blood running cold. Are you telling me they planned to hurt us? I don't know exactly, Tilda admitted. But they mentioned your son's trust fund. Mrs. Ashcroft said once you were taken care of, she would have legal authority as next of kin to manage it. Miles leaned against the wall, his worst fears confirmed. And Amber agreed to this? It was her idea, Tilda said, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. Before Miles could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Tilda quickly opened the supply closet and grabbed a stack of towels. Just getting these for the upper deck, sir, she said loudly as a crew member passed by. When they were alone again, she pressed something into Miles' hand, a small key. To the tender boat on the stern. If things go bad, that's your best chance. Thank you, Miles said, pocketing the key. I won't forget this. Miles returned to the dining area to find it empty, Rhett and Harper nowhere in sight. Panic surged through him as he rushed out onto the deck. Scanning the yacht for any sign of his son, he found them on the starboard side, Rhett pointing excitedly at something in the water while Harper stood close behind him. Dad, Rhett called when he spotted Miles. We saw a huge fish. It might have been a shark. Miles moved quickly to his son's side, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. That's great, buddy. Hardly a shark, Harper corrected with a dismissive wave. More likely a sunfish. Rhett's imagination is quite active. Like his father's, a voice said from behind them. Miles turned to see Amber approaching, Captain Law a few steps behind her. She was dressed in a flowing beach cover-up, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking every inch the carefree vacationer. We miss you at breakfast, Miles said, watching her carefully. I needed some quiet time, Amber replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The stress of the city, you know. Captain Law stepped forward. Mrs. Merrick mentioned you wanted to see the cove. I could take you and the boy out in the tender boat. The reef is spectacular. Miles measured the captain with his eyes, noting the man's tense posture, the way his hand rested near the knife on his belt. Actually, I think Rhett and I will explore on our own later. I insist, the captain said, his smile tight. It's a tricky area to navigate. Lots of hidden rocks. I appreciate the concern, Miles replied, matching the captain's false smile, but I'm pretty capable of handling a boat. Amber moved to Miles' side, her hand on his arm. Don't be stubborn, darling. The captain knows these waters. Miles could feel the trap closing around him. Maybe later, he said, buying time. Rhett and I were going to check out the view from the stern first. Right, buddy. Rhett, sensing the tension, nodded uncertainly. Can we see if there are more sharks? Sunfish, Harper corrected from a few yards away. Don't fill the boy's head with nonsense, Miles. Miles took Rhett's hand. Let's go, son. The stern of the yacht offered a panoramic view of the cove and the open ocean beyond. Rhett ran to the railing, peering down at the crystal-clear water below. Can we go swimming, Dad? He asked eagerly. Not right now, buddy, Miles replied, scanning the area for any sign of Tilda or other crew members who might help. The tender boat was secured to the swim platform below, a sleek motorboat for shorter excursions. Miles heard footsteps and turned to see Amber approaching, alone this time. Her expression was strange, a mixture of determination and something like regret. Rhett, sweetie, she called. Grandma wants to show you something special in the salon. A surprise. Rhett looked up, excited. What kind of surprise? If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, Amber replied with a forced laugh. Go on now. Your father and I need to talk. Miles tightened his grip on Rhett's hand. He stays with me. Don't make this difficult, Miles, Amber said, her voice hardening. Mother is waiting. I want to stay with Dad, Rhett said, picking up on the tension that Amber's smile became brittle. Rhett, go to Grandma. Now. He said he wants to stay with me, Miles repeated, shifting to place himself between Amber and their son. For a long moment, they stood in a silent standoff. Then Amber sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. Fine. Have it your way. She reached into the pocket of her cover-up and pulled out a small device of phone, Miles realized. She pressed a button and spoke. He's being difficult, both still on the stern. Before Miles could react, he heard more footsteps, heavier this time. Harper and Captain Lyle appeared, the captain's hand now openly resting on his knife. This is disappointing, Miles, Harper said, her voice cold. We'd hope to make this easier for everyone, especially for Rhett. Amber added, not meeting Miles' eyes. Miles backed up slowly, pulling Rhett with him until they were against the railing. What's the plan here, Harper? An unfortunate accident at sea. Something like that, Harper replied with a thin smile. So much cleaner than divorce. And with proper guardianship of Rhett, his trust fund can be properly managed. By you, Miles said, pieces falling into place. And I'm guessing Blake get the cut too, right, Amber? Amber's head snapped up. How do you know about Blake? I'm not as stupid as you all think, Miles replied, his mind racing. The tender boat was directly below them, but he'd need to create a distraction to get Rhett safely aboard. It doesn't matter what he knows, Harper cut in. He won't be sharing it with anyone. Captain Law stepped forward, drawing his knife. Best not to make this messy in front of the boy. Miles crouched down to Rhett's level, keeping his eyes on the three adults. Rhett, remember how we practiced jumping into the pool last summer? How you had to be brave. Rhett nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We're going to do that now, okay? Jump into the water. I'll be right behind you. Miles, don't be foolish, Harper snapped. You're trapped. Dad, Rhett's voice trembled. Trust me, buddy, Miles said softly. On 3, okay? 1, stop this nonsense, Amber said, stepping forward. Rhett, come to mommy. 2, Miles continued, gauging the distance to the water. Captain Lyle lunged forward, knife raised. 3, Miles shouted, lifting Rhett and setting him on the railing. Jump, Rhett. Now. Rhett hesitated for a split second, then pushed off, disappearing over the side with a small splash. Captain Lyle reached Miles just as he turned to follow his son. The knife slashed across his arm, drawing blood. Miles staggered, nearly losing his balance. You could have made this easy, Harper hissed, approaching from the side. You'll be erased, and no one will even question it. Goodbye, useless ones, Amber whispered, her eyes cold as she shoved Miles hard in the chest. Miles fell backward over the railing, the world spinning as he plummeted toward the water. The last thing he saw was the three of them peering over the edge, waiting to see if he would surface. Then he hit the water, the impact driving the air from his lungs, and darkness threatened to engulf him. Fighting against the pain and shock, Miles forced himself to swim, searching desperately for Rhett. He spotted his son a few yards away, struggling to stay afloat. With powerful strokes, Miles reached him, pulling the frightened boy against his chest. I've got you, he gasped, treading water while scanning the yacht above them. Harper, Amber, and the captain had disappeared from the railing, but Miles knew they would be watching, making sure the job was finished. Dad, I'm scared, Rhett whimpered, clinging to Miles' neck. It's okay, buddy, Miles assured him, though nothing was okay. Just hold on to me. Miles swam away from the yacht, keeping Rhett's head above water while fighting against his own pain and fatigue. In the distance, he spotted something floating, a wooden crate that must have fallen from the yacht or another vessel. With renewed determination, he swam toward it. The crate was large enough to support Rhett's weight. Miles lifted his son onto it, relieved to see it floating steadily. Stay on this. Okay, he instructed, keeping one hand on the crate to stay afloat himself. I'm going to push us away from the big boat. Are Mom and Grandma coming to get us? Rhett asked, shivering despite the warm air. Miles looked at his son's innocent face, wondering how to explain that the people who should have protected him had just tried to kill them both. Not right now, buddy, but we're going to be okay. I promise. As he pushed the crate farther from the yacht, Miles glanced back. The Poseidon's Grace was already moving, engines rumbling as it turned away from the cove, abandoning them to the vast, unforgiving ocean. Miles felt a cold rage building inside him, hardening into resolve. They had tried to take everything from him: his life, his son, his dignity. But they had failed. He was alive. Rhett was alive. And as long as that was true, Miles would find a way back. Not just to safety, but to justice. We're going to make it, Rhett, he said, his voice stronger now. And then we're going to make things right. As the yacht disappeared on the horizon, Miles began the long, painful task of navigating towards the distant shoreline, one careful push of the crate at a time. The sun hung low on the horizon by the time Miles spotted the shorest stretch of rocky beach beneath towering cliffs. His arms burned from hours of pushing the floating crate, his wounded arm throbbing with each movement. The salt water had cleaned the cut, but also made it sting mercilessly. Rhett had been quiet for the last hour, huddled on the crate, his eyes wide and fearful. The initial shock had worn off, leaving behind a stunned silence that worried Miles more than tears would have. "Almost there, buddy," Miles encouraged, though his own strength was failing. "See those rocks? That's where we're heading." The tide was with them, gradually pushing them toward shore. When the crate bumped against the pebbly shore, Miles lifted Rhett and set him down, then collapsed beside him, his breathing ragged. "Dad," Rhett's voice was small. "Why did Mom push you?" The question cut through Miles like a knife. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that his mother had tried to kill them both? "Something bad happened on the boat," Miles said carefully. "Your mom, she's made some mistakes. Big ones." Rhett pulled his knees to his chest. "Is she mad at us?" "No, buddy. She's mad at herself, I think. And she made some terrible choices because of it. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all Miles could offer for now." "I'm cold," Rhett said, shivering as the wind picked up. Miles forced himself to his feet, ignoring the pain shooting through his muscles. "Let's find some shelter for the night." The beach gave way to a steep, wooded slope. Miles carried Rhett when the terrain became too difficult, despite his own exhaustion. As darkness fell, he spotted what looked like a structure through the trees, a small building set back from the cliff edge. "Look at that," he said, pointing. "Might be somewhere we can rest." Drawing closer, Miles recognized it as a ranger station, the kind used by park services to monitor wildlife and assist hikers. The windows were dark, suggesting it wasn't currently occupied. The door was locked, but Miles found a window with a broken latch. "Wait here," he told Rhett, lifting the window and climbing inside. The station was basic but functional, a main room with a desk and radio equipment, a small kitchenette, and a back room with a cot. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, confirming the station was temporarily closed. He unlocked the front door and brought Rhett inside, setting on a chair while he assessed their resources. The radio was dead, either broken or without power. The kitchenette had a few canned goods and bottled water. A cabinet yielded a first aid kit, which Miles set aside to treat his arm. "Are we going to stay here?" Rhett asked, looking around with curiosity that momentarily replaced his fear. "For tonight at least," Miles replied, opening a can of beans. "It's safe and dry." Hungry, while Rhett ate, Miles examined his arm. The cut was deep but clean, the bleeding mostly stopped. Using supplies from the first aid kit, he cleaned and bandaged the wound as best he could. "Does it hurt?" Rhett asked, watching with concern. "Just a scratch," Miles lied, forcing a smile. "I've had worse." After their meager meal, Miles found a blanket in the back room and wrapped it around Rhett. He rummaged through the station supplies, locating a flashlight, matches, and a detailed map of the area. According to the map, they were in a remote section of coastal forest, at least 10 miles from the nearest town. Without a working phone or radio, reaching civilization would be a challenge, especially with Rhett. But that wasn't Miles' only concern. By now, Amber and Harper would have reported them missing, probably claiming they'd fallen overboard accidentally. If Miles and Rhett simply showed up alive, they'd be at risk again. He needed evidence of what had happened and allies who could help protect them. "Dad," Rhett's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Are the bad people going to find us?" Miles looked at his son, understanding that despite his attempts to shield Rhett from the truth, the boy had grasped the essential reality. People he trusted had tried to hurt him. "No," Miles said firmly, sitting beside Rhett and pulling him close. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever. Promise?" "I promise, buddy. We're going to be okay." Eventually, Rhett fell asleep against Miles' chest. Miles carried him to the cot in the back room and tucked the blanket around him, then returned to the main room to continue examining the map and planning their next move. The station had a wood stove, which Miles lit using the matches he'd found. The warmth spread slowly through the small building, easing some of the chill from his bones. Outside, the wind howled and rain began to patter against the windows. Miles sat at the desk, the map spread before him, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. His wife had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible. She had conspired with her mother to murder him and their son, her own child, for money. And yet, a cold clarity was settling over Miles. This wasn't the time for grief or shock. This was the time for survival, for planning, for vengeance. They had tried to erase him just as Harper had promised. Instead, they had awakened something that had been dormant since his days in combat, a methodical, ruthless determination that would not rest until justice was served. Miles woke to sunlight streaming through the dusty windows of the ranger station. Rhett was still asleep, his face peaceful. For a moment, Miles allowed himself to simply watch his son breathe, grateful for the miracle of his survival. That a noise outside the station snapped Miles to attention. He moved silently to the window, peering through the grime-streaked glass. Nothing visible. Then he heard it again, a rustling in the underbrush, too deliberate for wind or wildlife. Miles grabbed a heavy flashlight from the desk, the only weapon at hand, and positioned himself beside the door. The steps grew closer, hesitant but definitely human. The door handle turned slowly. Miles raised the flashlight, ready to strike. The door swung open, and a boy stepped inside, thin, with shaggy dark hair and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He froze when he saw Miles, eyes widening in alarm. "Don't move," Miles ordered, lowering the flashlight slightly when he realized how young the intruder was. 14, maybe 15 at most. "Holy shit," the boy gasped, taking a step back. "You're not supposed to be here. No one's supposed to be here." "Neither are you, from the looks of it," Miles observed, taking in the boy's worn jeans and faded hoodie. "This station is closed." "Yeah, for like 6 months," the boy replied, recovering some of his composure. "Who are you? What happened to your arm?" Miles considered his options. This kid could be a liability or an asset, depending on how he played it. "My son and I are hiking. Got lost. Found this place to shelter." It was a weak story, but he needed time to assess the situation. The boy raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Hiking without supplies? And that cut looks like a knife wound, not a branch scratch." Before Miles could respond, a small voice called from the back room. "Dad? Who's there?" "It's okay, Rick," Miles called back, not taking his eyes off the visitor. "Just someone passing by." Red appeared in the doorway, blankets still wrapped around his shoulders. He blinked at the stranger, curiosity replacing fear. "You have a kid with you," the boy said, his demeanor softening. "Look, I'm not going to cause trouble. I've just come here sometimes to think." Miles lowered the flashlight completely, but remained alert. "What's your name?" "Jace." "Jace Cordell." The boy shifted his backpack. "I live with my aunt in Cedar Point, about 6 miles that way." He gestured vaguely eastward. "Cedar Point has a police station?" Miles asked casually. That Jace's expression darkened. "Yeah, not that they're much use." "What?" "Just curious." Miles wasn't ready to involve authorities yet, not without evidence. Now when the Ashcrofts had connections and influence. Over a breakfast of canned peaches and the last protein bar from Jace's backpack, Miles told their story: the invitation, the tensions on the yacht, the betrayal, and their desperate swim to shore. He left out some details to spare Rhett, but Jace was old enough to read between the lines. "So your wife and her mom tried to kill you," Jace summarized when Miles finished. "For money. My trust fund," Rhett piped up, having absorbed more than Miles had realized. "Grandma wants it." Jace looked between them, skepticism giving way to belief. "That's seriously messed up. But why not just go to the police? It's attempted murder. It would be my word against theirs," Miles explained. "The Ashcrofts are influential. Connected. They'd claim it was an accident, that we fell overboard, and they searched but couldn't find us. And they'd make sure to finish the job if they knew we survived," he added silently. "So you need proof," Jace concluded, understanding dawning on his face. "That's why you asked about my drone." Miles nodded. "Were you flying it yesterday?" "Around Blackfish Cove?" "Yeah, actually. Late morning to early afternoon. Testing the new battery life." Jace's eyes widened. "You think I might have caught something on camera?" "It's a long shot," Miles admitted. "But if your drone was recording and happened to be near the yacht when we went overboard." Jace was already digging through his backpack, pulling out a laptop and connecting it to a small device. Let me check. I record pretty much everything when I'm testing. Never know when you'll catch something cool. Rhett moved to sit beside Jace, fascinated by the technology. Miles watched them together, struck by the absurdity of the situation relying on a teenager they'd just met, reviewing drone footage in an abandoned ranger station, while the people who should have protected them believed them dead. Here we go, Jace said, fingers flying over the keyboard. I've got about 3 hours of footage from yesterday. Let me see if I can find anything with a yacht in it. He scrolled through video files, occasionally expanding one to play a short segment. Miles and Rhett watched over his shoulder, the tension building with each passing minute. Wait, Miles said suddenly. Go back to that last one. Jace reopened the file and played it. The camera was high above Blackfish Cove, capturing the stunning blue water and surrounding cliffs. And there, in the center of the frame, was the unmistakable silhouette of the Poseidon's Grace. That's it, Miles confirmed. That's Harper's yacht. Jace zoomed in, the high-resolution footage remaining surprisingly clear. What time did you go overboard? Around noon, I think, Miles estimated. The sun was directly overhead. Jace fast-forwarded through the footage, stopping when the timestamp read 11:58. Let's watch from here. The three of them huddled around the small screen, watching as the drone captured a panoramic view of the cove. The yacht remained in frame, small figures visible on the stern deck. There, Miles pointed. That's us. The figures were too distant to identify clearly, but there were definitely people on the stern. As they watched, there was a commotion, and someone fell or jumped from the yacht. That's you jumping, Jace said, eyes fixed on the screen. Moments later, a larger figure went over the side. Even from this distance and angle, it was clear the person had been pushed, not fallen. Holy shit, Jace breathed. You weren't exaggerating. Miles felt a cold satisfaction. Here was the evidence he needed, not perfect, but enough to raise serious questions about the accident the Ashcrofts would surely claim had occurred. Can you make copies of this? He asked Jace. Already on it, the teenager replied, fingers flying over the keyboard again. I'll save it to my cloud account too, just in case. I could help, Jace offered, surprising both himself and Miles. My aunt works nights. She'd never know if you crashed at our place for a day or two. At least until you figure things out. Miles studied the boy, tried to gauge his sincerity. Why would you do that for strangers? Jace shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the direct question. Because it's the right thing to do? Because this is the most interesting thing that's happened around here in forever? Take your pick. And because you know what it's like when adults let you down, Miles guessed, seeing something familiar in the boy's defensive posture. Jace's silence was confirmation enough. We'll need to be careful, Miles said after a moment. If the Ashcrofts realize we survived, they'll come looking. My aunt's place is on the outskirts of town, Jace said. Pretty private, and I know the back roads. We can avoid being seen. As they prepared to leave the ranger station, a new determination settled over Miles. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure Amber, Harper, and everyone involved in their betrayal paid for what they had done. While Miles, Rhett, and their unexpected ally made their way through the coastal forest, events were unfolding exactly as Miles had predicted. The Poseidon's Grace had returned to Portland Harbor late the previous night, and by morning, the tragic news was spreading. Miles Merrick and his young son had been lost at sea in a terrible accident. Harper Ashcroft stood in her mahogany-paneled office, watching the press gather on the lawn of the family mansion. Her expression was carefully composed into one of dignified grief, her black designer suit immaculate. Remember, she instructed Amber, who sat rigidly on a leather sofa nearby. Let me do most of the talking. You're too overcome with grief to say much. Amber nodded, adjusting the dark sunglasses that hid her eyes. I still don't understand why we need to do this so publicly. Couldn't we have just filed a report with the Coast Guard? Harper sighed with exaggerated patience. Because control of a narrative is everything. We need public sympathy, not suspicion. She crossed to the desk and picked up a folder. Besides, I've already filed the initial paperwork for guardianship of Rhett's estate. The judge is a family friend. He'll expedite things out of compassion for our loss. And if they find the bodies? Amber asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. They won't, Harper replied confidently. Captain Lyle assured me the currents in that area are notoriously unpredictable. By now, they're miles out to sea. The press conference was held on the sweeping front lawn of the Ashcroft estate, with Portland Harbor visible in the distance, a calculated backdrop that emphasized the maritime nature of the tragedy. Local reporters and a few from regional outlets gathered around a podium adorned with the Ashcroft shipping logo. Harper approached the microphones, the picture of dignified sorrow. Amber hung back, one hand clutching a handkerchief, the other supported by Captain Lyle, who had exchanged his uniform for a somber suit. "Thank you all for coming on this difficult day," Harper began, her voice steady but appropriately subdued. "Yesterday, our family experienced a tragedy that no words can adequately describe. My son-in-law, Miles Merrick, and my beloved grandson, Rhett, were lost at sea during what should have been a joyful family outing." The reporters leaned forward, cameras clicking rapidly. "We were enjoying a beautiful day in Blackfish Cove. Miles had been drinking something he struggled with for years." Harper paused, allowing the fabricated detail to sink in. "He insisted on taking Rhett to the stern to look at marine life. My daughter was concerned, but didn't want to create a scene in front of the child." Amber stepped forward on cue, dabbing at non-existent tears behind her sunglasses. "Captain Lyle and I were in the pilot house when we heard Amber's screams," Harper continued. "We rushed to the stern to find both Miles and Rhett gone. According to my daughter, Miles had been leaning dangerously far over the railing with Rhett in his arms. They fell." A murmur ran through the gathered press. "We immediately began search efforts," Captain Lyle added, stepping to Harper's side. "I reversed course and circled the area for hours. We called in Coast Guard assistance, but by then, night was falling and the currents in that area are treacherous. The Coast Guard has officially classified this as a search and recovery operation, not a rescue," Harper said, her voice breaking slightly for effect. "We are offering a substantial reward for any information, but at this point," she trailed off, shaking her head sorrowfully. "Mrs. Ashcroft," one reporter called out, "there are rumors that Miles Merrick and your daughter were having marital difficulties. Any comment?" Harper's expression hardened momentarily before softening into practiced regret. "Every marriage has its challenges. Miles was a troubled man who never quite adjusted to life in our family. But my daughter loved him, and he was Rhett's father. We are all devastated by this loss." When the press conference concluded, Harper escorted a distraught Amber back into the mansion, Captain Lyle following a respectful distance behind. Once the heavy doors closed, blocking out the press, Amber removed her sunglasses, her eyes dry and calculating. "Do you think they bought it?" "Of course they did," Harper replied, leading the way to her office. "The grieving widow, the concerned mother, the tragic accident, it's a story they've seen 100 times. No one will question it." "And Blake?" Amber asked, a note of anxiety creeping into her voice. "When can I see him?" "When I say it's appropriate," Harper snapped. "For now, focus on your role as the grieving widow. I'll be meeting with our attorneys tomorrow to expedite the transfer of guardianship for Rhett's trust fund." Amber's eyes narrowed. "We had an agreement, Mother. Half of that money comes to me, to Blake and me, for our new start, and you'll get it," Harper assured her, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Once everything is settled and legally secure. These things take time, Amber. Patience." As Amber left the office, Harper returned to the window, gazing out at the harbor where the Poseidon's Grace was docked. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Soon, Rhett's substantial trust, left by Miles' parents before their own tragic accident years ago, would be under her control. The irony wasn't lost on her. Like father, like son, both Miles and his father have been obstacles to Harper's ambitions, and both had been removed. The walk to Jace's aunt's house took nearly 3 hours, following trails and back roads to avoid being seen. Miles carried Rhett when the boy's energy flagged, despite his own fatigue and the persistent throbbing in his wounded arm. The house that emerged from behind the trees was modest but well-maintained, a single-story structure with weather-beaten blue siding and a small porch. It sat on a generous lot, with no neighbors visible through the surrounding woods. "Nice place," Miles commented as they approached. "Quiet. That's why Aunt Karen bought it." Jace replied, fishing a key from under a flower pot. She liked her space. Works for me too. Inside, the house was neat and sparsely decorated, with comfortable but worn furniture. Jace gave them a quick tour: kitchen, living room, bathroom, 2 bedrooms. You guys could take my room, he offered. I'll crash on the couch. We can't put you out like that, Miles protested. Jace shrugged. Whatever. The couch is pretty comfortable anyway. He headed to the kitchen. You hungry? I can make sandwiches or something. While Jace prepared food, Miles got Rhett settled with a shower and borrowed clothes, a t-shirt of Jace's that hung to Rhett's knees. The hot water and clean clothes made an immediate difference in the boy's spirits. Dad, when are we going home? Rhett asked as Miles helped him dry his hair. The innocent question caught Miles off guard. Not for a while, buddy. We need to stay safe first. Because of Mom and Grandma. Rhett pressed, his young face serious. Miles sat beside him on the edge of Jace's bed. Yes, they did something very wrong, and we need to make sure they can't do it again. They tried to hurt us, Rhett said, the statement rather than a question surprising Miles. In the water? Yes, they did. Miles saw no point in lying. Rhett had experienced the truth firsthand. But why? Doesn't Mom love us anymore? The question broke Miles' heart. He pulled Rhett close, searching for words that a 5-year-old could understand. Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes because they want the wrong things. Your mom, she made the worst kind of mistake. But that's not because of anything you did. You're perfect, and I love you more than anything in the world. After getting Rhett fed and settled for a nap, Miles finally took his own shower. The hot water stung his wound, but washed away days of salt and grime. In the steamy bathroom mirror, he examined the damage: a 4-inch gash across his upper arm, the edges already showing signs of infection. Jace knocked on the door as Miles was re-bandaging the wound with supplies from the medicine cabinet. Hey, I found some antibiotics in my aunt's medicine cabinet. Might help with that. He handed Miles a prescription bottle, left over from when she had that root canal. Miles read the label: amoxicillin, not expired. Thanks. This could make the difference. I also found these, Jace added, holding up a pair of scissors and an electric razor. Thought you might want to, change your look a bit, in case anyone's looking for you. It was a smart suggestion. Miles' military short haircut was distinctive, and if the Ashcroft had circulated his description, good thinking. 20 minutes later, Miles emerged with a closely shaved head and the beginnings of a beard. Combined with the borrowed clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt that were slightly too small, he looked different enough to avoid immediate recognition. Jace looked up from his laptop and nodded approvingly. Not bad. Corporate drone to wilderness survivalist. What are you working on? Miles asked, glancing at the screen. Editing the drone footage, Jace replied. Enhancing what I can, cleaning up the audio. There wasn't much sound besides wind, but I thought it might help. Miles looked over his shoulder, impressed. You know your way around video editing. Want to do film production someday? Jace admitted with a slight shrug. Or drone cinematography. Something creative. You've got talent, Miles observed. And guts helping us like this. Jace seemed uncomfortable with the praise. Whatever. It's the right thing to do. He closed one program and opened another. So what's the next move? You said something about contacting people you trust. Miles sat across from him, energy draining now that the immediate crisis had passed. There's one person I think can help. Marla Quinn. We served together, Navy intelligence. She runs a digital news site now, specializing in corporate corruption exposés. Local, based in Portland, but her reach is national. Miles rubbed his newly shaved head. The problem is contacting her without alerting anyone else. I can't use my phone if it even survived the water, and calling from here might be traceable. How about a burner phone? Jace offered. Use it when my regular phone got taken away. It's prepaid, no connection to me. Miles raised an eyebrow. You're surprisingly prepared for someone your age. My dad was paranoid about government surveillance, Jace explained with another shrug. Before he split, he taught me some tricks. Guess some of it stuck. Marla answered on the 4th ring, her voice guarded. Who is this? It's Ghost, Miles said, using his old call sign from their intelligence days without a pause. Then, you're supposed to be dead, Ghost. It's all over the news. Yeah, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, Miles replied dryly. Holy shit, it is you. Marla's voice softened slightly. Miles, what the hell is going on? They're saying you were drunk and fell overboard with your kid. It's a long story, and I can't tell it over the phone, Miles replied. But the short version is, my wife and mother-in-law tried to kill us for Rhett's trust fund. We survived. They don't know that yet. A low whistle came through the speaker. That's not what I expected. Your boy okay? He's safe. We both are for now. But I need help, Marla. Evidence, protection, a way to bring them down without endangering Rhett. Where are you? Miles hesitated. Can't say exactly. Coastal Oregon. That's all I can give you right now. Smart, Marla approved. Listen, I can help, but I need more to go on. Evidence, details, something I can work with. I've got video, Miles told her. Drone footage that caught the incident. Not perfect, but it contradicts their story. And a witness, the boat's stewardess, who might be willing to talk. Send me what you've got, Marla instructed. Encrypted through the old channel if you can access it. I'll start digging from my end. The Ashcrofts have enemies. Competitors. Disgruntled employees. I'll find leverage. Later that evening, Jace's phone buzzed with a news alert. Dude, Jace said, sliding the phone across the table. You're officially dead. The headline was stark. Local mechanic and son presumed dead after yachting accident. Below, it was a photo of Miles in his Navy uniform, next to a school picture of Rhett. Miles read the article, rage building with each carefully crafted lie. Amber was quoted extensively, describing her devastation and how she had watched helplessly as her husband and son fell from the yacht. Harper lamented the loss of her troubled but beloved son-in-law and her precious only grandchild. The article mentioned that private memorial services will be held once the recovery efforts were complete. They're really selling it, Jace observed, watching Miles' expression darken. They're laying groundwork, Miles corrected. Listen to this. In light of the tragedy, Family Court Judge William Hendricks has expedited guardianship proceedings for the estate of the minor child, noting the unusual circumstances. He looked up. Hendricks is in Harper's pocket. She's already moving on Rhett's trust fund. So what's the plan? Go public? Tell everyone you're alive? Miles shook his head. Not yet. If we surface without enough evidence, they'll just try again, maybe more carefully next time. He handed the phone back. No. First we gather ammunition. Build a case so strong they can't wriggle out of it. Then we strike. The television in Jace's living room played footage of a somber-faced Amber Merrick visiting the dockyard where her late husband had worked. She clutched a framed photo of Miles and Rhett as she accepted condolences from Miles' colleagues, tears streaming artfully down her cheeks. And the Oscar goes to... Jace muttered from the couch, where he was attempting to teach Rhett how to play chess. Miles watched from the kitchen doorway, a muscle working in his jaw. 2 days had passed since they'd contacted Marla, and while they waited for her signal, the Ashcroft were busy cementing their narrative of tragic accident and grieving family. She's good, Miles acknowledged grimly. Always had a talent for performance. He'd spent those 2 days recovering his strength, treating his infected arm with antibiotics, and planning with Jace while keeping Rhett's spirits up. The wound was improving, though still painful, and Miles had regained some of his former energy. Rhett looked up from the chessboard at the sound of his mother's voice on television. His expression was complicated confusion mixed with hurt and a wariness no 5-year-old should possess. Can we turn it off? Miles asked quietly. Jace immediately switched channels to a cartoon, drawing Rhett's attention back to happier things. The boy had been remarkably resilient, but Miles knew the trauma of betrayal would need proper addressing when they were safed up. Miles' borrowed phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number Marla signal. The message contained only an address in the neighboring town of Newport and a time. 9 p.m. We have a meeting, Miles told Jace. Tonight. With your Navy friend? Miles nodded. Which means we need someone to watch Rhett. My aunt, Jace suggested. She's off tonight. I can tell her you're a friend from school whose dad is in the hospital. She won't ask too many questions. This turned out to be accurate. Karen Cordell, a practical woman in her 40s with Jace's dark hair and direct manner, accepted the hastily constructed story without much scrutiny. Hospital's expensive, was her only comment. Hope your dad has good insurance. Eric. She used the fake name Miles had provided. Thanks for watching my son, Miles said. Genuinely grateful, Karen waved this off. Kids are easy. Feed 'em, keep 'em alive, don't let 'em play with knives. We'll be fine. The address Marla had provided was a storage facility on the outskirts of Newport. Miles and Jace arrived 15 minutes early, parking the used car they'd bought with cash from a local seller who didn't ask questions. Wait in the car, Miles instructed. If I'm not back in an hour, take the phone and call the number labeled emergency contact. Tell them Ghost sent you. Reluctantly, Jace agreed to stay behind. Miles approached Unit 247 cautiously, every sense alert for signs of a trap. The area was quiet, most of the storage units dark and locked. He knocked on the rolling metal door with the pattern he and Marla had established years ago. 3 quick, 2 slow. The door rattled upwards 6 inches, enough for a voice to emerge from the darkness inside. Favorite weapon? SIG Sauer P226, though I haven't carried in years, Miles replied, recognizing Marla's security question. The door rolled up completely, revealing a compact space illuminated by a single battery-powered lantern. Marla Quinn stood in the center, arms crossed, her muscular frame silhouetted against the light. Her dark hair was shorter than Miles remembered, shaved on the sides with the top pulled back in a small ponytail. New tattoos adorned her forearms, intricate patterns disappearing into her rolled-up sleeves. You look like shit, Ghost, she greeted him, though her smile was genuine. Tend to happen when your family tries to drown you, Miles replied dryly. Marla gestured him inside and closed the door behind them. The storage unit was sparsely furnished with folding chairs and a card table covered in laptops and files. Mobile command center? Miles asked, looking around. Something like that, Marla confirmed. Been investigating Harper Ashcroft for months. Your situation just elevated the priority. For the next 30 minutes, Miles recounted the full story from the initial invitation to their escape and current hiding place. Marla listened without interruption, occasionally typing notes on one of her laptops. The footage your kid sent is gold, she said when he finished. Not perfect quality, but definitely shows you were pushed, not drunk and falling. He's not my kid, Miles clarified. Just a good Samaritan with a drone hobby. Whatever. He's got skills. Marla turned one of the laptops to face Miles. I've been gathering intel on Ashcroft shipping for a series on corporate corruption in Portland. Financial records, whistleblower statements, evidence of bribery. Harper's company is in serious trouble. She pulled up spreadsheets and internal documents. The Shanghai terminal was a massive overreach. Cost 3 times the projected budget and is operating at 30% capacity. They're hemorrhaging cash and taking on toxic loans to cover it. That's why she wants Rhett's trust fund, Miles realized. It's not just greed, it's desperation. Exactly, Marla confirmed. That trust is worth, what, $7 million? 8.3, Miles corrected. My parents had good life insurance and investments. It's all in a trust that activates when Rhett turns 21, with provisions for education before that. I'm the trustee until he's of age. And if something happens to you, then guardianship transfers to Amber, and if she's unavailable, to her next of kin, Harper. So my wife helped try to murder me and our son for a corporate bailout. Miles said, the reality of it's still surreal. People have killed for less, Marla pointed out. But here's where it gets interesting. Harper's not just moving on the trust fund. She's also filed for expedited probate on your personal assets. I don't have much, Miles said with a shrug. The house, my truck, some savings, and a 20% stake in Merrick Marine Service. Marla added, watching Miles' reaction carefully. Miles straightened. My father's company? That's been defunct for years, since before they died. Not defunct, dormant. Marla pulled up another document. Your parents owned a small marine repair service that operated in the same harbor where Ashcroft Shipping is based. When they died, their share of the business went to you, but you never activated it. The other 80% was owned by silent partner Elliot Barnes. The name meant nothing to Miles. And Elliot Barnes died last month. No heirs. His share of Merrick Marine reverts to the remaining partner you. Or now, presumably, Harper Ashcroft as Rhett's guardian. Miles struggled to process this information. But why would Harper want a small, inactive repair service? Because, Marla said, pulling up a map on her second laptop, Merrick Marine holds the lease on 3 acres of prime harbor frontage land that Ashcroft Shipping needs for their planned terminal expansion. Land they've been trying to acquire for years. The pieces clicked into place. So this isn't just about the trust fund. It's about the land. Land worth tens of millions in development potential, Marla confirmed. With control of Merrick Marine, Harper gets both the cash injection from Rhett's trust and the real estate Ashcroft Shipping desperately needs. Miles felt a cold rage building inside him. My parents' accident. Was it really an accident? Marla's expression turned grim. I can't prove anything, but the timing is suspicious. They died right after refusing an offer from Ashcroft to buy their company. And now Harper tried to kill me and my son, Miles said, his voice deadly quiet. For money and land. What are you going to do about it? Marla asked. Miles stood, pacing the small space. I need to stop them. Not just expose them, stop them. Permanently. Going public now would be risky, Marla cautioned. The drone footage is compelling, but not definitive. And Harper has judges and officials in her pocket. I'm not talking about going public. Not yet. Miles turned to face her. I want to break them first. Piece by piece. Marla's eyebrow raised. You have something specific in mind. Harper and Amber think they've won, Miles said, a plan forming as he spoke. They've declared us dead. They're moving on our assets. They're playing the grieving family. I want to make them feel hunted. Uncertain. I want them to turn on each other. A slow smile spread across Marla's face. Now you're speaking my language, Ghost. Where do you want to start? You mentioned Amber has a lover. Blake something. Blake Hollis, Marla confirmed, pulling up a photo of a polished-looking man in his 30s. Financial planner. Not particularly successful on his own, but ambitious. Been seeing Amber for at least 8 months, based on social media breadcrumbs. Where does he live? Condo in the Pearl District. Very modern, very expensive, Marla supplied. Why? Because, Miles said, his expression hardening. Mr. Hollis and I are going to have a conversation. 2 nights later, Blake Hollis entered the executive bathroom at the Ashcroft Shipping headquarters, where he'd been attending a late meeting with potential investors. The bathroom was empty, the polished marble surfaces gleaming under recessed lighting. He was washing his hands when the door opened behind him. In the mirror, he saw a figure enter bald, bearded, dressed in a custodial uniform. Something about the man's deliberate movements made Blake uneasy. All yours, Blake said casually, reaching for a paper towel. The man didn't respond, instead moving to check the stalls one by one, ensuring they were empty. We turned back to Blake. There was something familiar about his face, despite the beard and shaved head. Do I know you? Blake asked, an inexplicable nervousness rising in his throat. No, the man replied calmly. But I know you, Blake. I know what you've been doing with my wife. Blake's blood ran cold as recognition dawned. Miles? Miles Merrick? But you're dead. Miles finished, stepping closer. That was the plan, wasn't it? Me and my son, lost at sea. Very convenient for everyone. Especially you. I don't know what you're talking about. Blake stammered, backing away until he hit the wall. Amber said it was an accident. They've been searching. Save it. Miles cut him off. I know everything. The affair, the plot, Harper's financial troubles. All of it. Blake's hand inched toward his pocket, likely reaching for his phone. Miles moved with military precision, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting until Blake gasped in pain. That would be a mistake, Miles said softly. What do you want? Blake asked, his confident facade crumbling. Money? I can get you money. I want you to listen very carefully, Miles replied, maintaining his grip on Blake's wrist. You're going to stop seeing my wife. You're going to leave Portland. Tonight. You can't be serious, Blake protested. I have a life here, clients. Miles increased the pressure on Blake's wrist, feeling the bones grind together. I'm entirely serious. And to make sure you understand that, the movement was swift and controlled. Miles slammed Blake's hand down onto the marble countertop and, with precise force, brought his elbow down on the man's fingers. The crack of breaking bones echoed in the tiled space, followed by Blake's howl of pain. Financial planners need their hands. Miles observed as Blake cradled his injured appendage. That's your dominant hand, right? Unfortunate. You're insane, Blake gasped, face pale with shock and pain. No, Miles corrected him. I'm a father protecting his son, and I'm just getting started. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Run, Blake. Run far and fast. Because if you're still in Portland tomorrow, a broken hand will be the least of your worries. He left Blake slumped against the bathroom wall, the first strike delivered. By morning, Amber would know her lover had fled, and Harper would realize their perfect plan had a dangerous flaw. In the week following Miles' confrontation with Blake, the carefully constructed narrative of the Ashcrofts began to show cracks. Blake Hollis had indeed fled Portland, leaving behind confused clients and a hastily sublet condo. His abrupt departure had thrown Amber into a panic, though she could share her distress with no one except her mother. Miles monitored the situation from the safety of a new location, a small cabin on Marla's property outside Portland, more secure than Jace's aunt's house and closer to the action. Jace split his time between home and the cabin, his technical skills proving invaluable to their operation. You sure this will work? Jace asked, hunched over his laptop on the cabin's small kitchen table. On the screen was the drone footage, now enhanced and edited to clearly show the moment Miles and Rhett went overboard. It's a calculated risk, Miles admitted, but Marla's site has enough credibility and reach that the Ashcrofts can't just ignore it. Marla, who was preparing coffee at the counter, nodded in agreement. The footage alone won't bring them down, but it will create public doubt. And doubt is the first step toward investigation. The plan was to release the drone footage anonymously through Marla's news site, framing it as material received from a concerned citizen who had been flying a drone in Blackfish Cove on the day of the accident. The footage would directly contradict the story Harper and Amber had been telling, showing not a drunken fall, but a deliberate push. Ready when you are, Jace said, finger hovering over the enter key. Miles glanced at Rhett, who was napping in the small bedroom. Do it. Within hours of releasing the footage, local news outlets had picked up the story. By evening, it had reached regional coverage, with reporters attempting to contact Harper and Amber for comment. The Ashcroft publicity team released a statement calling the footage misleading and suggesting it had been manipulated, but the damage was done. They're scrambling, Marla reported after a call with one of her sources at the Portland Tribune. Harper's called an emergency meeting with her PR team and lawyers. Miles nodded in satisfaction. Good. Let them feel the pressure. The next morning brought even more developments. Marla's website published a follow-up piece featuring snippets from Tilda's interview, enough to make clear that a crew member had witnessed concerning behavior, but not enough to reveal Tilda's identity. Ashcroft stock is down 12%, Jace announced, monitoring financial news sites. Investors are getting nervous. Miles was plotting their next move when his phone buzzed, this time with a message directly from Tilda. It contained audio files and a short text. Found these on my phone. Recorded accidentally when my phone was in my pocket during cleaning rounds on the yacht. Thought you might want them. Miles played the first file, and Amber's voice filled the small cabin. It's not like I have a choice, Mother. Miles controls everything, Rhett, the trust fund, all of it. As long as he's alive, I'm trapped. Harper's response was coldly practical. Then we remove the obstacle. You've done it before with lesser problems. The implications were chilling. Miles shared a look with Marla, who appeared equally disturbed. You've done it before, he repeated softly. What the hell does that mean? Could be nothing, Marla suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. Manipulative language. Or there could be confirmation that my parents' accident wasn't an accident at all, Miles countered, a new rage building inside him. That Amber was involved in that too. Before they could discuss it further, Jace called out from his laptop. Guys, you need to see this. Now. They crowded around the screen, where breaking news alerts showed Harper Ashcroft at an impromptu press conference outside the family mansion. Her usual composure was strained, her eyes hard behind a veneer of indignation. The video being circulated is a disgraceful attempt to profit from my family's tragedy, she was saying, her voice tight with controlled anger. Our legal team is investigating the source of this clearly manipulated footage. The suggestion that my daughter or anyone in the Ashcroft family was involved in anything other than a tragic accident is not only false but deeply hurtful. The camera panned to Amber, standing slightly behind her mother. She looked pale and drawn, her eyes darting nervously. My daughter is still grieving the loss of her husband and child, Harper continued. These baseless accusations are causing immeasurable pain to a woman who has already suffered beyond what anyone should endure. She's good, Marla muttered, watching Harper's performance, redirecting attention, playing the victim, questioning the evidence without actually addressing it. Miles watched Amber's face, reading the fear beneath her practiced sorrow. She's rattled. Blake disappearing. Now this footage, she's starting to unravel. The next phase of their plan came together organically. Using Tilda's recordings and the financial evidence, Marla prepared a comprehensive exposé for her news site. Unlike the initial drone footage release, this would directly name Harper and Amber Ashcroft as conspirators in both financial fraud and attempted murder. Once this goes live, there's no turning back, Marla warned. The Ashcrofts will use every resource they have to discredit and silence us. They already tried to kill me and my son, Miles pointed out. I'm way past caring about their retaliation. They were finalizing the article when Marla's phone rang. It was Tilda, her voice urgent and hushed. They know, she said without preamble. Harper's private investigator located me. I'm leaving Seattle tonight. Are you safe right now? Marla asked, concerned. For the moment. But I needed to warn you, they're connecting the dots. The PI mentioned looking for a teenager with drone equipment and a military man with a young boy. Miles and Marla exchanged alarmed glances. They're hunting us, Miles said grimly. We need to accelerate the timeline, Marla decided. I'll publish what we have first thing tomorrow. Better to go on the offensive than wait for them to find us. The article went live at 6 a.m., when most of Portland was just waking up. By 8 a.m., it had been picked up by regional news outlets. By noon, national media organizations were reporting on the Ashcroft scandal. The piece was meticulously researched and devastating in its implications. It presented the drone footage alongside enhanced audio from Tilda's recordings, financial evidence of Ashcroft Shipping's precarious position, and documentation of Harper's hasty attempts to gain control of Rhett's trust fund. Most damning was the connection Marla had drawn between Miles' parents' death years earlier and the recent attempt on Miles and Rhett, both accidents conveniently benefiting Harper Ashcroft financially. The reaction was swift and chaotic. Ashcroft Shipping's stock plummeted. Investors publicly distanced themselves. Harper issued a terse statement claiming the allegations were baseless and defamatory and promising legal action. But the most interesting response came from an unexpected source. Captain Ezra Lyle, apparently sensing which way the wind was blowing, contacted Marla's office seeking immunity in exchange for his testimony. He's willing to confirm everything, Marla reported after speaking with her editor. How Harper planned it, how Amber pushed you, all of it. He says he was coerced into helping. Bullshit, Miles growled. He knew exactly what he was doing. Of course he did, Marla agreed. But his testimony would seal the case. And he's the weak link. If he's already turning, it won't be long before the whole conspiracy unravels. They were discussing how to proceed when Jace, who had been monitoring social media and news updates, called their attention to a breaking news alert. Amber Ashcroft checked in a hospital after a parent's suicide attempt. The report was sparse on details, but indicated that Amber had been found unresponsive in her bathroom by household staff and rushed to Portland Memorial Hospital. Is she actually hurt? Was Miles' first question, skepticism evident in his voice. Hard to say, Marla replied, already making calls to her hospital contacts. Could be genuine distress, could be a ploy for sympathy, could be a way to avoid questioning. Or Harper trying to eliminate another liability, Miles suggested darkly. Within the hour, Marla had confirmation. Amber was stable, the overdose substantial, but not life-threatening. She was under observation and, significantly, police guard standard procedure when a potential criminal suspect required medical care. They're not letting Harper in to see her, Marla reported. Medical staff only for now. The implications were clear. Law enforcement was taking the allegations seriously, keeping the conspirators separated while they built their case. By evening, the pressure had intensified. The district attorney's office announced a formal investigation into both the alleged murder attempt and Ashcroft Shipping's financial practices. Harper had retreated to the family mansion, surrounded by lawyers and security personnel. "She's cornered," Marla observed, watching helicopter footage of the Ashcroft estate, now surrounded by news vans and police vehicles. But a cornered predator is still dangerous. Miles nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to end this quickly, before she finds a way to escape, or worse, to reach Red." The plan they formulated was bold and risky. Instead of remaining in hiding, Miles would leverage the chaos to make a final, decisive move against Harper. With Amber hospitalized and under guard, Harper isolated, and public opinion turned against the Ashcrofts, the moment was right for the final strike. The Ashcroft mansion stood on a bluff overlooking Portland Harbor, its stone facade and manicured grounds projecting an aura of impenetrable wealth and power. Once, this display of affluence had intimidated Miles. Now, watching through binoculars from Marla's car parked a discreet distance away, he saw only a fortress protecting a cornered enemy. "Security's been doubled since yesterday," Marla observed, lowering her own binoculars. "Two at the gate, probably more inside. Harper's not taking chances." "Good," Miles replied. "Fear makes people careless." Their plan hinged on Harper's desperation. With Amber in the hospital under police guard, Captain Lal negotiating with prosecutors, and public opinion turned firmly against her, Harper's options were dwindling. According to Marla's sources, the authorities were preparing arrest warrants but proceeding cautiously, aware of Harper's connections in high places. Miles wasn't willing to wait. After nearly losing everything, he needed closure, not just justice through legal channels, but the satisfaction of confronting Harper directly, forcing her to face what she had done. Their strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Using Marla's connections in financial journalism, they had created a fictional potential investor, a reclusive European shipping magnate, looking to acquire distressed American assets. With Ashcroft Shipping's stock in free fall, the prospect of a bailout investor was exactly the lifeline Harper would be desperate to grab. The bait had been laid the previous evening through intermediaries. The mysterious investor, skeptical about the negative press but still interested in Ashcroft's potential, had requested a private meeting away from offices and board members, somewhere the delicate negotiations could occur without scrutiny. Harper had suggested her yacht. The investor had countered with his own vessel, to be crewed by his personal staff. After some negotiation, Harper had agreed, seeing the meeting as possibly her last chance to save the company she had built. What she didn't know was that the luxurious charter yacht waiting at Portland Harbor belonged to one of Marla's wealthier sources, temporarily borrowed for this operation. And its crew consisted of Marla, Jace, monitoring communications from a hidden location, and Miles himself, disguised as the investor's personal security. Miles checked his appearance one last time in the car's mirror. With his shaved head, beard, tinted glasses, and tailored suit, he bore little resemblance to the dockyard mechanic Harper knew. The transformation was completed by a shoulder holster containing a non-functional prop gun, intimidating in appearance, but legally harmless. "Remember, this is about evidence and confession, not revenge," Marla cautioned as they prepared to leave. "We need her words on record, clear and undeniable." "I know," Miles assured her, though part of him wanted much more than just Harper's confession. The rage he had carried since that day in Blackfish Cove hadn't diminished. It had crystallized into something harder and colder. They drove separately to the harbor, Miles arriving first to oversee final preparations. The yacht, the Aurora, was smaller than the Poseidon's Grace, but no less impressive, its sleek lines and polished surfaces projecting exactly the right image of success and discretion. At precisely 2 p.m., a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the dock. Harper emerged from the back seat, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Miles made in 3 months. Behind her came 2 men in dark suit security, as Miles had predicted. "Game time," Marla murmured, straightening her jacket and moving to the gangplank to greet their guest. Miles remained partly concealed in the yacht salon, watching through the window as Marla welcomed Harper with practiced deference. He could see the strain beneath Harper's composed exterior, the tightness around her mouth, the slight tremor in her hand as she gestured for her security to remain at a distance. "Mr. Reinhardt is waiting in the main salon," Marla was explaining as she led Harper aboard. "He appreciates your discretion in this matter." "Discretion is always valuable in business," Harper replied smoothly, "particularly when dealing with temporary complications." Miles moved into position, standing at attention beside an impressive leather chair that faced away from the entrance. The chair concealed Mr. Reinhardt, in reality, a collection of pillows arranged to suggest a seated figure. Harper entered the salon, her eyes quickly scanning the luxurious space before settling on the back of the large chair. "Mr. Reinhardt, I appreciate your interest in Ashcroft shipping during this challenging period." Miles kept his face impassive, eyes hidden behind the tinted glasses, as Marla closed the salon door and moved to stand beside him. "Mr. Reinhardt prefers to listen first," Marla explained. "Perhaps you could outline the current situation with your company and how you see our potential partnership developing." Harper took a seat on the sofa across from the chair, placing her handbag beside her. "Certainly, Ashcroft Shipping is experiencing what I would characterize as a temporary public relations challenge. Baseless allegations have affected our stock price, but the fundamentals of the business remain strong." "The murder allegations, you mean?" Marla prompted, her tone professionally curious rather than accusatory. Harper's expression tightened momentarily. "A tragic misunderstanding, fueled by opportunists and sensationalist media. My son-in-law and grandson's accident was exactly that, an accident. The idea that my daughter or I would harm family is absurd. And yet," Marla continued, "your daughter is currently under medical and police supervision, and your captain appears to be cooperating with authorities. Amber is emotionally fragile, overwhelmed by grief and these horrible accusations," Harper replied, her voice hardening slightly. "As for Captain Lyle, I cannot speak to his motivations, but I assure you his statements will be proven false." "Mr. Reinhardt is particularly interested in your expansion plans," Marla said, changing tack. "The harbor property, I believe." Harper seemed to relax slightly at the business-focused question. "Yes, we have been pursuing a strategic expansion of our Portland terminal. We recently secured key waterfront properties that will allow us to double our capacity. Properties formerly belonging to Merrick Marine Service," Marla noted. "Convenient timing with the Merrick family's tragic accidents." Harper's composure slipped just for a moment. "I fail to see the relevance of these details to our potential partnership." "Mr. Reinhardt is very thorough," Marla explained. "He likes to understand all aspects of a business before committing his resources." "Then perhaps Mr. Reinhardt should speak for himself," Harper suggested, her patience visibly wearing thin. "I came here to discuss a substantial investment, not to defend myself against vague insinuations." Miles exchanged a glance with Marla. "It was time." "You're right," Miles said, stepping forward and removing his glasses. "We should speak directly." Harper's reaction was everything he had hoped for: shock, fear, and disbelief washing across her face in rapid succession. "You," she gasped, half rising from the sofa. "This is impossible." "Not impossible," Miles corrected calmly. "Just inconvenient for your plans." Harper's hand dove into her handbag, but Miles was faster. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, gripping her wrist before she could withdraw whatever she was reaching for. With his other hand, he took the bag and passed it to Marla, who quickly found what Harper had been seeking: a small, pearl-handled pistol. "Really, Harper?" Miles said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Another attempt?" "In broad daylight." "Self-defense," Harper spat, trying to pull away from his grip. "You're supposed to be dead." "Sorry to disappoint," Miles replied, releasing her wrist and stepping back. "Though not as sorry as you're going to be. What do you want? Money? Is that what this elaborate charade is about?" Harper demanded, recovering some of her composure. "I want justice," Miles replied simply. "For myself, for my son, And for my parents. Your parents. Harper's laugh was brittle. What fantasy have you constructed now? Not a fantasy, Miles countered, nodding to Marla, who set a laptop on the table between them. Let's review the evidence, shall we? For the next 20 minutes, they laid out their case methodically: the drone footage, Tilda's recordings, the financial trail linking Harper to fraud and embezzlement, and finally, the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of Miles' parents years earlier. Circumstantial, Harper dismissed, though her confidence was clearly shaken. Nothing that would hold up in court. Perhaps not alone, Miles agreed. But combined with Captain Lyle's testimony and Tilda's, and now your own words, which are being recorded as we speak. Harper's eyes widened, scanning the room for cameras. You're bluffing. Am I? Miles challenged. You took everything from me, Harper. My wife, my home, nearly my son. Did you really think I wouldn't be thorough in taking you down? You have no idea who you're dealing with, Harper hissed, her composure cracking. I built Ashcroft Shipping from nothing. I've destroyed people far more powerful than you. Like Miles' parents? Marla suggested innocently. Another accident that conveniently gave you access to property you needed? Prove it, Harper snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. We don't have to, Miles replied. The authorities already are. This meeting isn't about gathering evidence. It's about giving you a chance to understand exactly how completely you've lost. Harper stared at him, hatred radiating from her in almost palpable waves. Amber was right about you. Too stubborn to know when you're beaten. Beaten, Miles repeated incredulously. I survived your murder attempt. I protected my son. I've exposed your crimes to the world. Tell me, Harper, which part of that sounds like defeat to you? For a long moment, Harper said nothing, her mind visibly racing behind her cold eyes. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a harsh, empty sound devoid of humor. You think you've won, she said, shaking her head. How charmingly naive. Do you have any idea how many judges, politicians, and officials owe me favors? This evidence of yours will never see a courtroom. It already has, Marla informed her, turning her phone to show Harper a news alert. Judge orders Ashcroft assets frozen pending criminal investigation. The color drained from Harper's face. That's not possible. Judge Hendricks wouldn't. Hendricks recused himself. Marla explained with evident satisfaction. Cited conflict of interest. The case went to Judge Rivera, not a member of your country club, I believe. Miles watched as the reality of her situation finally penetrated Harper's armor of arrogance. This wasn't just about him and Red anymore. The empire Harper had built, the power she had wielded so ruthlessly, was crumbling around her. Amber, Harper said suddenly, she'll never testify against me. She's my daughter, the daughter you were ready to sacrifice when she became a liability. Miles asked, I wouldn't count on her loyalty, especially now that Blake Hollis has resurfaced in Brazil, telling some very interesting stories about plans he made with Amber, plans that didn't include you. Took it. Satisfied? Harper's expression hardened into something ugly and desperate. What do you want from me? A confession? Fine. I wanted you gone. You were holding Amber back, controlling that trust fund that rightfully belongs to the Ashcroft family. When the opportunity came to eliminate you both, I took it. Satisfied? Both. Miles repeated, his voice deadly quiet. You admit you intended to kill Rhett to your own grandson? Harper's eyes were cold as winter. Collateral damage. The trust fund passes to next of kin. With both of you gone, that would be Amber, and by extension me, and my parents. Miles pressed, needing to hear the truth. Harper hesitated, then shrugged, as if discussing a minor business transaction. A similar situation. We needed that harbor property. They refused to sell. Accidents happen on boats all the time. The casual admission of orchestrating his parents' deaths hit Miles like a physical blow. He had suspected, but hearing Harper confess with such cold indifference made his vision blur with rage. Miles, Marla said quietly, sensing his emotional state. Remember why we're here. The reminder helped him regain control. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and protection. About ensuring that Harper and Amber could never threaten Red again. You're finished, Harper, Miles said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Your company, your reputation, your freedom all gone. You think I'm afraid of prison?" Harper scoffed, though the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. "People like me don't serve time like common criminals." "We'll see," Miles replied. "But even if you somehow escape the full legal consequences, everyone now knows exactly who and what you are. You'll never rebuild from this." Harper stared at him with pure hatred. "You should have stayed dead, Miles. It would have been easier for everyone." "Not for my son," Miles countered. "And that's the only thing that matters to me." Before Harper could respond, Marla's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She stepped away to answer it, returning moments later with a grim expression. "That was my contact at Portland PD," she informed them. "Amber's awake and talking. Apparently, she's decided to make a deal, full testimony against her mother in exchange for leniency." Harper's face went slack with shock. "She wouldn't. She can't. She already has," Marla confirmed. "They're on their way here now, with arrest warrants for both of you." For the first time, genuine fear replaced the calculation in Harper's eyes. "Amber would betray me? After everything I've done for her? Like mother, like daughter," Miles observed coldly. "You taught her well, Harper. When someone becomes a liability, cut them loose." The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the approaching authorities. Harper seemed to collapse inward, her imperious posture giving way to the reality of her situation. "It's over, Harper," Miles said, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "You tried to erase us, but instead, you erased yourself." The small cabin in the woods outside Portland had been Miles and Rhett's home for nearly 3 months while the legal aftermath of the Ashcroft case unfolded. Autumn had turned the surrounding forest into a riot of red and gold, and the cabin's stone fireplace kept the increasingly cool evenings comfortable. Miles sat on the front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching Rhett chase falling leaves in the clearing. At 6 now, his birthday, celebrated quietly last week, Rhett had bounced back with the resilience only children possess. There were still nightmares sometimes, still moments when he would ask difficult questions about his mother, but overall, he was thriving. The same could be said for Miles. The initial media frenzy around the Ashcroft conspiracy had gradually subsided, though the case remained in the public eye as it moved through the courts. Miles had given his testimony, answered the necessary questions, and then retreated with Rhett to this peaceful sanctuary Marla had arranged. Today marked a significant milestone. The district attorney had called that morning to inform Miles that both Harper and Amber had accepted plea deals rather than risk trial. Harper would serve 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and a host of financial crimes. At her age, it was effectively a life sentence. Amber, having cooperated extensively with prosecutors, received a reduced sentence of 8 years, with eligibility for parole after 5. She had also voluntarily terminated her parental rights to Rhett, sparing everyone the pain of a custody battle. Captain Lyle, in exchange for his testimony, had received a lesser sentence of 5 years. Tilda had been granted immunity and was starting a new life with her brother in Seattle, supported by a foundation Marla had helped establish for whistleblowers. The only loose end was Blake Hollis, still somewhere in South America, beyond the reach of American authorities. Miles couldn't bring himself to care about the man's fate. Blake had lost his professional credentials, his reputation, and any hope of accessing the Ashcroft wealth he had coveted. Justice enough, in Miles' view. The sound of a vehicle approaching pulled Miles from his thoughts. Moments later, Marla's familiar SUV appeared on the narrow dirt road leading to the cabin. Behind it came his second car, Jace, and his Aunt Karen, who had become regular visitors. Reinforcements have arrived, Miles called to Rhett, who abandoned his leaf chase to race toward the vehicles. "Jace!" the boy shouted excitedly. "Did you bring a new drone?" Jace emerged from Karen's car, grinning as he lifted a large case. "Sure did, buddy. Ready to test it out." While Jace and Rhett headed for the clearing behind the cabin, Marla joined Miles on the porch, accepting the coffee he offered. "So it's official," she noted. "Both Ashcrofts behind bars. Hard to believe it's really over," Miles admitted. "Part of me is still waiting for Harper to somehow undo it all." "Not this time," Marla assured him. The evidence was too overwhelming, the public sentiment too strong against them. Even Harper Ashcroft's connections couldn't save her from this. Miles nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. What happens to Ashcroft Shipping now? Being restructured under new management, Marla replied. Most of the board members resigned to distance themselves from the scandal. The company will survive, but the Ashcroft name is being removed from everything. Good, Miles said simply. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Jace demonstrate the drone controls to an enthralled Rhett. I've been meaning to tell you, Marla said eventually. The trust fund has been fully secured. Judge Rivera appointed an independent fiduciary to manage it until Rhett comes of age, with you maintaining oversight. And the Merrick Marine property reverted to your control as sole surviving partner. Marla smiled. It's worth considerably more now than when your parents owned it. Several developers have already expressed interest in purchasing or leasing it. Miles had been considering his options regarding the property. He could sell it for a substantial sum, ensuring Rhett's future beyond even the trust fund. Or he could reactivate the business, perhaps expanding it into something that honored his parents' legacy while creating a future for himself and his son. I haven't decided what to do with it yet, he admitted. Part of me wants nothing to do with anything connected to the Ashcrofts. But it was my parents' business, their dream. You have time, Marla pointed out. No rush to decide. Miles nodded, grateful for her understanding. The past months had taught him the value of patience, of allowing solutions to emerge organically rather than forcing decisions. Karen joined them, carrying a picnic basket. I brought lunch, she announced. And those cookies Rhett likes. You're going to spoil him, Miles protested, though his smile belied any genuine concern. Karen shrugged. That's what honorary aunts are for. Besides, Jace adores that kid. I've never seen him connect with anyone the way he has with Rhett. It was true. The unlikely friendship between the teenager and the young boy had flourished, with Jace naturally falling into the role of protective older brother. After the initial danger had passed, Miles had worried that Jace would drift back to his own life, but instead, he had become a fixture in their small, makeshift family. What's the plan for today? Karen asked, setting out sandwiches on the small porch table. Nothing special, Miles replied. Maybe a hike later if the weather holds. We're keeping it simple these days. Simple is good, Karen approved. After what you've been through, simple is exactly what you both need. The sound of Rhett's laughter carried across the clearing as Jace demonstrated some aerial maneuver with the drone. The boy's unguarded joy was the most healing thing Miles had experienced in months. After lunch, the five of them set out on a trail that wound through the woods to a small lake. Rhett ran ahead with Jace, both of them carrying fishing rods that Miles doubted would see much actual use. Have you thought about what's next? Marla asked as they walked. Once the dust settles completely, I've been offered a job at a marine engineering firm in Newport, Miles told her. Good salary, flexible hours, work I'm qualified for. There's a small house for sale not far from the beach, with good schools nearby. Sounds perfect, Marla observed. Stable, secure, away from Portland and all the memories. Miles nodded. That's the plan. Start fresh somewhere Rhett can just be a normal kid, not the Ashcroft grandson or the boy whose mother tried to kill him. And you? Karen asked perceptively. What do you need, Miles? The question gave him pause. For so long, his needs had been secondary to survival, to justice, to Rhett's well-being. Peace, he said finally. Just peace. At the lake, they spent the afternoon skipping stones and watching Jace attempt to teach Rhett the basics of fishing. The simplicity of the day, the absence of urgency or fear, felt like the most precious luxury Miles could imagine as twilight approached. They made their way back to the cabin. Rhett, tired from the day's adventures, fell asleep during the short drive, his head resting against the window. Miles carried his sleeping son into the cabin and tucked him into bed, taking a moment to simply watch the steady rise and fall of his chest. The trust and innocence of childhood, so nearly destroyed by greed and malice, preserved against all odds. Outside, Marla and Karen were preparing to leave, Jace already loading the drone case into the car. Thanks for today, Miles said, embracing each of them. For everything, really. What's the plan for tomorrow? Jace asked. Miles smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. Nothing specific, just living, one day at a time. After they departed, Miles returned to the porch, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The quiet was profound, broken only by the gentle sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl. In the cabin's small library, Miles had discovered a chest containing letters from Amber to her mother, dating back years before their marriage. He'd read them all, seeking understanding or perhaps closure. What he'd found instead was a chronicle of manipulation and emotional dependency, Harper methodically shaping her daughter into an extension of herself. The letters had filled in gaps, explained behaviors that had confused him during their marriage, but they hadn't provided what he truly sought a reason to forgive, or at least to understand how the woman he had loved could participate in planning his death and their sons. Miles had burned the letters that morning, watching as the paper curled and blackened in the fireplace, not out of anger or revenge, but as a symbol of finally releasing the past. The Ashcrofts had taken enough from him. He wouldn't allow them to occupy his thoughts and emotions any longer. The future stretched before him, now uncertain in many ways, but free from the shadows that had darkened his life for so long. He would raise Rhett with love and honesty, would build a new life in Newport, would perhaps even find joy again that he had survived the abyss. He had harnessed the fire of his rage into justice rather than vengeance. And now, finally, he could move forward not unchanged, but unbroken. Miles took a deep breath of the cool evening air, feeling the tension of months finally releasing from his shoulders. He hadn't forgiven, but he had won, and that was enough.